He was born in a place where dreams learned to whisper, not because people lacked ambition, but because reality spoke louder than hope. His town woke up slowly, wrapped in dust and routine. The sun rose early, not to inspire, but to remind everyone that another long day had already begun. Mornings smelled of soil, sweat, and unfinished plans. Children learned responsibility before they learned play, and laughter often waited until the work was done. Here, childhood ended early. Not with a warning, but with necessity. Boys learned how to carry weight before they learned how to dream. Girls learned patience before they learned possibility. Everyone understood survival. Very few understood choice. Life moved forward whether you were ready or not, and falling behind was never an option. His parents worked harder than most people could imagine. Their hands told stories their mouths never did, stories of sacrifice, of missed chances, of quiet endurance. They did everything right, yet progress always seemed just out of reach, like a door that never fully opened. School fees came before comfort. Food came before dreams. Books were treasured, but so was bread. Education was respected, but survival demanded priority. Every decision was a calculation, every hope measured against reality. Dreams were not dismissed, they were simply postponed. And still, everyone believed in one thing. Someday, someone would leave. Someone would travel beyond the familiar roads, beyond the limits of the town, beyond the life everyone else had inherited. That person would change the family story forever. This belief lived quietly in conversations, in glances, in the way parents looked at their children when they thought no one was watching. From a young age, he heard the same sentence repeated like a prayer, spoken with equal parts hope and desperation. Once you travel, everything will change. Those words settled deep inside him. They became both a promise and a burden. Travel wasn't just movement, it was escape, responsibility, and expectation all at once. It meant becoming more than himself. It meant carrying the dreams of those who stayed behind. And so he learned to walk carefully, to dream quietly, and to prepare patiently, waiting for the moment when whispering dreams might finally learn how to speak out loud. As the years passed, leaving became a measurement of success. It was no longer about who you were, but where you were going. Staying behind required explanation. Leaving required none. The town quietly rewrote its definition of achievement, and distance became proof of worth. Those who stayed were questioned. Those who left were admired, even before they achieved anything. It didn't matter what awaited them on the other side. The act of departure itself was enough. A bus ticket, a visa, a goodbye photo at the roadside, these became symbols of victory. People celebrated potential more than reality, escape more than effort. Every celebration ended with the same question, spoken casually but carrying weight. When are you traveling? It followed him everywhere. At weddings, at funerals, at quiet visits to relatives. Even moments meant for joy or reflection were redirected toward that single expectation. The question wasn't curious, it was corrective. A reminder that he was still here. He watched friends disappear one by one. Some left with confidence, promising they would return transformed. Some left afraid but hopeful, clinging to the idea that courage would come later. A few left without warning, slipping away as if silence could protect them from disappointment. Some sent pictures, smiling faces in unfamiliar streets, carefully cropped to hide the struggle. Some sent promises, stories of opportunities, assurances that success was just around the corner. And some never sent anything at all. Their absence became louder than words. No updates. No explanations. Just the quiet understanding that not all journeys led to triumph, and not all failures came home. Slowly, staying began to feel like failure. Not because he lacked ability. Not because he lacked ambition. But because the world around him decided that progress lived elsewhere. that growth required distance. That purpose could not exist within familiar borders. Remaining meant being overlooked, no matter how hard you worked or how deeply you cared. The idea settled into his mind gradually, like dust after a passing vehicle. Leaving was no longer a dream whispered at night. It was no longer a possibility to consider. It became an obligation. A responsibility to family. A debt to expectation. A promise he hadn't made but was still expected to keep. And with that realization came a quiet pressure, because leaving now meant more than going somewhere new. It meant proving that everyone was right. The decision to leave did not come with celebration. There were no announcements, no applause, no moment that felt victorious. Instead, it arrived quietly, after long nights of thinking and mornings filled with doubt. It came in the space between exhaustion and hope, where certainty never fully formed but hesitation became unbearable. He weighed the idea over and over. Leaving meant risk. Staying meant regret. Neither choice felt safe, but one at least offered movement. In the silence of early mornings, when the world had not yet demanded answers from him, he wondered if courage was simply the act of choosing the unknown. There was no grand plan. No detailed map of the future. No guarantees waiting on the other side. Only hope wrapped tightly in uncertainty, fragile but persistent. He carried expectations that were not entirely his own, and dreams that had grown heavier with time. To prepare, he sold what little he owned. Not because he wanted to, but because starting over demanded sacrifice. Objects that once brought comfort were exchanged for the possibility of something more. Each item sold felt like a quiet goodbye to a version of himself that had learned to survive with less. On the day he left, goodbyes were brief. In his culture, long goodbyes meant weakness. They invited doubt, tears, and second thoughts. Strength was measured by restraint, by the ability to walk away without looking back too long. Still, small moments lingered. His mother held his hands a second longer than necessary. Her grip said everything her voice could not. Fear, pride, hope, and loss all existed in that silence. His father said very little, offering only a nod and a steady presence. Words were unnecessary. Fear was already understood. As the vehicle pulled away, the familiar slowly faded into distance. Streets he knew by heart blurred together. Faces became shapes. Sounds softened. What remained was the weight in his chest, the realization that leaving was real now, irreversible. He told himself he would return changed. Stronger. Wiser. Worth the sacrifice everyone had made. He did not know how that change would happen, or when it would be complete. He only knew that leaving was the first step toward becoming someone else. And as the road stretched forward, uncertainty traveled with him. But so did hope, quietly refusing to stay behind. The place he arrived in was nothing like the pictures. The images he had seen promised brightness, wide streets, tall buildings, smiling faces frozen in moments of success. But reality moved differently. Life here moved faster, sharper, without pause. People walked with purpose, eyes forward, conversations brief and transactional. There was no time for stories, no patience for hesitation. Nobody asked where he came from. No one wanted to know his history, his sacrifices, or the distance he had traveled to stand where he was. The only question that mattered was simple and cold. What can you do? Work came quickly, almost immediately, as if the city was always hungry for labor. But dignity did not arrive with it. Tasks were repetitive, exhausting, and often invisible. He learned that effort did not always equal respect, and that being needed was not the same as being valued. The hours were long. The pay was small. Each day demanded more than the last. His body adjusted before his spirit did. He pushed through fatigue, telling himself this was temporary, that endurance was part of the process. Still, every day tested his pride. Every mistake felt heavier without familiarity to soften it. At night, silence became heavy. The noise of the city faded, leaving him alone with his thoughts. No familiar voices. No shared laughter. Just the hum of distant traffic and the weight of unspoken questions. He replayed memories of home, not the hardship, but the warmth, the sense of belonging he had once taken for granted. Home felt far away, not just in distance, but in memory. Messages from home arrived often, filled with belief and expectation. You are lucky to be there. You've made it. Everything must be better now. He read them carefully, unsure how to respond. They did not know that survival was not success, that working without rest was not progress, that loneliness could exist even in crowded places. They did not know that leaving did not guarantee becoming more. For the first time, he understood something painful, something no one had prepared him for. The journey he imagined, filled with growth, opportunity, and transformation. And the life he entered, marked by struggle, humility, and quiet endurance, were not the same. And in that realization, he began to understand that becoming someone else would take far more than simply leaving home. Time passed, but progress did not feel close. Weeks turned into months, and the calendar kept moving even when his life felt still. Days blended into one another, measured not by milestones or memories, but by work hours and exhaustion. Morning alarms sounded like warnings, not beginnings. Even time off felt borrowed, never fully his. He woke up tired, went to bed tired. Fatigue became familiar, almost comforting in its predictability. His body learned the routine before his mind could question it. Work, commute, sleep, repeat. The rhythm left little space for reflection, and slowly, without noticing, he stopped asking himself important questions. Somewhere between surviving and enduring, he stopped asking who he was becoming. The dreams he carried from home no longer fit the life he was living. They felt oversized, impractical, almost naive in this new context. The person he once imagined himself becoming belonged to a different world, one where effort led to recognition and sacrifice led to reward. Here, effort simply led to more effort. Pride became quiet. Hope became cautious. He learned not to expect too much, because expectation made disappointment sharper. He celebrated smaller victories now, getting through the week, paying bills on time, avoiding mistakes. Ambition didn't disappear, but it learned how to hide, how to wait without demanding attention. Some nights, when sleep refused to come, questions surfaced. Was leaving a mistake? He replayed moments from home, wondering if staying would have been easier, or if the struggle would have simply taken a different shape. He wondered whether the pressure he carried was worth the distance he had created between himself and everything familiar. Or was this simply the price of becoming more? Maybe growth was never meant to be gentle. Maybe becoming someone new required losing parts of yourself first. Comfort, certainty, identity. Maybe the discomfort meant he was still moving forward, even if it didn't feel like it. He had crossed borders, learned new systems, adapted to unfamiliar rules. Yet somehow, he had not found himself. Instead, he felt suspended between who he was and who he was supposed to become. Not the same person who left home, but not yet the person he hoped to return as. Just someone trying to endure long enough for meaning to catch up. And in that quiet uncertainty, one truth became clear. Leaving had changed his surroundings, but the harder journey, the one inward, was still unfinished. Change did not arrive loudly. There was no announcement. No sudden opportunity. No miracle that altered everything overnight. Nothing external marked the moment. No one noticed a difference. The world continued exactly as it had before. Yet something subtle shifted inside him, something firm, something deliberate. It began with a decision. Made quietly. Kept privately. He realized something important, something simple but demanding. If survival was unavoidable, then growth had to be intentional. Waiting for conditions to improve had kept him stuck. Hoping for rescue had only deepened frustration. No one was coming to redirect his life. That responsibility belonged to him now. So he started small. He began waking earlier, even when his body protested. The early hours were silent and unclaimed, free from demands. He used them to read, slowly at first, sometimes only a few pages before exhaustion returned. Still, he showed up again the next morning. After long days of work, when comfort tempted him to do nothing, he learned small things instead. Skills that felt insignificant on their own. Words he didn't understand yesterday. Concepts that didn't promise immediate results. There was no applause, no validation, no guarantee that any of it would matter. It was not impressive. There were no dramatic transformations to show anyone back home. No stories worth exaggerating. No visible proof that he was doing better. But what it lacked in spectacle, it made up for in consistency. And consistency began to change him. Progress was slow, so slow it was almost invisible. Days passed without obvious improvement. Some weeks felt like setbacks. Doubt still visited, especially when fatigue returned or old comparisons resurfaced. But something important had changed. He was no longer standing still. For the first time in a long while, direction replaced confusion. He didn't know exactly where the path would lead, but he could feel himself moving forward. The fog hadn't cleared completely, yet it no longer felt endless. Each small effort built quietly on the last, forming a foundation he had never had before. He was still far from success. The distance between where he stood and where he hoped to be remained wide. Struggle had not disappeared. Uncertainty still existed. But despair no longer dominated his thoughts. Because he was no longer lost. He was becoming disciplined, intentional, patient. And for the first time since leaving home, he wasn't just surviving the days, he was shaping them, one quiet decision at a time. Returning home felt heavier than leaving. When he had first departed, hope had carried him forward. Now, experience weighed him down. Abroad had changed him, but not in the ways people expected. There were no dramatic success stories to tell, no wealth to display, no visible proof that the journey had been worth it. What he carried instead was quieter, harder to explain. He returned quietly. No celebration. No announcements. Just a familiar road stretching ahead and a town that appeared smaller than memory. Buildings looked closer together. Streets seemed shorter. Even the air felt different, as if time had moved on without waiting for him. The place that once felt vast now felt contained, yet deeply rooted in him. Some people asked questions. Their curiosity was careful, wrapped in politeness. They wanted to know how long he stayed, where he worked, what he gained. Each question carried an unspoken expectation. Others avoided questions altogether, choosing silence over discomfort. They didn't want answers that challenged what they believed about leaving and success. In many eyes, returning meant failure. The story they understood had only one ending: leave, succeed, and never come back unless there was something to show for it. Coming home without visible rewards felt like proof that the journey hadn't worked, that the risk hadn't paid off. But they could not see what he carried back. They could not see the discipline built through routine and endurance, the perspective earned from humility and struggle, the understanding that success was not always loud, and growth did not always shine. He had learned patience, self-reliance, and the ability to start again without resentment. Home welcomed him slowly, not with judgment, but with caution. People needed time to recognize the changes that weren't immediately obvious. Old habits and old expectations still lingered, and he was no longer the person who had left under their weight. He noticed it in small ways. In how he listened more and spoke less. In how setbacks no longer rattled him the same way. In how he worked without waiting for praise. These differences didn't demand attention, but they shaped how he moved through familiar spaces. Home did not doubt him. It simply needed time to adjust, to understand that the measure of his journey could not be seen at first glance. And as days passed, familiarity returned, not as it once was, but as something deeper. He hadn't returned empty-handed. He had returned prepared. Time gave the journey meaning. Not because it brought wealth. Not because it delivered recognition. But because it brought honesty. Time stripped away illusions. It revealed what effort alone could not promise and what distance alone could not fix. He learned that leaving does not automatically lead to progress. A new place does not erase old struggles, it often reshapes them. And staying, he realized, does not mean settling. Sometimes it means choosing to build instead of escape. Some roads teach speed. Others teach depth. His road taught patience. It taught him how to sit with uncertainty without running from it. How to work without immediate reward. How to grow without an audience. He learned that real transformation is rarely dramatic. It happens quietly, in repetition, in choices made when no one is watching. The world measures success loudly, with numbers, with titles, with visible outcomes. But life measures it differently. Life measures success quietly, through growth that cannot be photographed, through responsibility that cannot be announced, through becoming someone you can respect when the noise fades. He learned to value consistency over praise, integrity over appearance, progress over performance. These lessons did not come quickly, and they did not come easily. They came through setbacks, reflection, and the humility of starting again. His journey did not make him famous. It did not turn him into a story people envied. There were no headlines, no dramatic reveals, no applause waiting at the end. But it did something more important. It made him grounded. Grounded in who he was, not who he pretended to be. Grounded in purpose, not comparison. Grounded in the understanding that growth does not need permission, and meaning does not need validation. He understood now that success is not always about how far you travel. Sometimes it is about how deeply you understand yourself. Sometimes it is about returning wiser, steadier, and more honest than when you left. And sometimes, the longest road home is not measured in distance, but in time, patience, and self-respect. If you love true African stories about resilience, identity, and quiet transformation, subscribe to this channel.